Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We do begin our meetings with an invocation, and today we have Julie Wilson from Boulder Street Church here to lead us. Please join if you would like.
Good morning. A little chilly out there, so let's warm this place up. So we just come and we just welcome you, the Lord Most High, into this place. We welcome your presence. And we just give you thanks at the gate of our city, county, and praise. We thank you for the first responders, the responders that responded to the fire yesterday. We thank you for wisdom and revelation and how to manage this and all other things that have to do with any emergency in our city. We thank you as we remember those yesterday and came together as a nation to remember our freedoms, the sacrifices, and those, Father, that served and were sacrificed, the families with loss. And we just thank you that you are there for comfort. And this morning, I just felt led to pray for our county commissioners personally, for their families, for strength. I pray, Father, that if there's anything out of order, that you would put it into order. I ask you, Lord, where, Father, there is need of forgiveness, that you will release it, that you will bring it forth, that you will give them strength in their bodies, in their minds, their hearts, their souls, their spirits. Father, that you would give them wisdom and revelation and understanding in the knowledge of your counsel and your will. We thank you today, Father, as they serve you and those that serve with them. And we, the people, as we come together as one, that there'd be unity and honor. And we thank you as we pray over this agenda today. I just want to say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done over this agenda today, this county, this city, this state, and our nation. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Vander Werf, would you please lead us in the pledge? Item number 3.
Item number 3 is staff emergency items, and I'm unaware of any staff emergency items today.
Item number 4.
Item number 4 is changes, postponements, and notice of the next meeting. I'm unaware of any changes or postponements to today's agenda, and the next meeting will be September 14th at 1:30 p.m. for land use.
Thank you. And before we move on to item number 5, can I get a motion to excuse Commissioner Gonzalez?
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner Gonzalez.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. I will call the roll. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vander Werf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Commissioner Gonzalez is excused with a vote of 4-0. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is the consent calendar, including items 5A1 through 5U7.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on any item on the consent calendar? Hearing none in the room. Any online? And none online. I will bring it up here for discussion and a motion. If I could ask for chairman's privilege to mention a few things briefly first. On this lengthy consent calendar, you will see that there are 8 Department of Human Services contracting items. And I just wanted to point out that these really indicate just a huge level of collaboration that this department does within our community. You've got partnerships for everything from providing services for smaller counties to ensure that Chafee-eligible foster kids that live in a smaller county without the structure to do the placement, they can still get placed and stay in their communities, to court care, Safe Passage, Temple Hoyne Buell, and our Center on Fathering, and then partnering with 2 transportation providers to ensure that kids can get to and from schools as a part of a contract. So this is it's just really great work, and they happen to all be on this same consent calendar today. And as you take a big look at it, it just screams collaboration and partnership. I'm very proud of our Department of Human Services on the way they do that, to figure out a way to provide the services that we are supposed to provide, no matter the circumstance, and by using the private market and nonprofit partners to do so. Commissioner Geithner.
I just also want to briefly mention and give my thanks to the chair for working to have a great process, I think, for doing interviews for the Board of Health member who is also on here for approval under item H. I've been very outspoken about some of my concerns around the handling of things that public health has done, specifically around a lot of the COVID things that happened. And so I really appreciate the work to make sure that all my questions were answered. And I'm really looking forward to this approval very specifically. This individual was very impressive, very thoughtful, very knowledgeable, and I think truly really focuses on the research that's there and speaking honestly about that, which I think is very important for the public when we talk about the kind of trust that needs to be rebuilt after the pandemic and a lot of the things that were just really frustrating for citizens. So thank you very much, Commissioner Bremer, for kind of rearranging that and letting me be a part of that process.
Thank you. Commissioner
Yes.
Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And since we are talking about some of the consent calendar items, which we'll vote on in this block, I think there are plenty of great things that are on this list to also talk about. Some which many people never even realize happens from time to time would be item P, which is a resolution to recognize revenue in the amount of $1,000 that was donated from some citizens. This actually happens from time to time, and this is to the sheriff's office. So citizens actually do contribute funds from time to actually help El Paso County and its several public agencies to do their job. And I think that's just wonderful to recognize. Also, I'd like to just go to the procurement and contracts consent calendar items. We continue to work extensively and very broadly in our infrastructure projects. On this particular list, items U1 through U7, we have almost $1 million for our asphalt pavement preservation program that we'll be approving today. Included in that is purchase of more bulk fuel for county operations, purchase of more Ford Explorers for the sheriff's office, approval of a contract amendment for the Peyton Road Bridge Repair Project for our Department of Public Works, and several other projects on here that continue to express the work that the county is doing with regard to infrastructure and making sure that we do everything we can to have good, safe transportation infrastructure in the community for people to go to work and enjoy their lives. And I just thought it was worthwhile to point that out. We do it quite frequently, these kinds of things, but we actually rarely talk about it, and every once in a while it's important to bring the point up. And those are my comments for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. With all of those comments being made, can we have a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion because those were all great comments. I will move approval of our consent calendars, which consist of items 5A all the way to the letter U7.
Second?
That has been moved and seconded. Any further comments? Okay, Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. The consent calendar passes 4-0 with Commissioner Gonzalez excused. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is comments by elected officials and commissioner liaison reports.
Do we have any countywide elected officials in the room or online? Okay, with that, I will begin with Commissioner Williams today.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to first thank my commissioners. I was out of town for a few weeks. I appreciate them continuing with the work of county business. And first of all, I wanted to say I was able to attend a very special 9/11 ceremony yesterday. Across the street from my house lives the Yancey family. Jean and Flo Yancey, they're the parents of Catherine Yancey Labrie, who was the head flight attendant on the second flight that crashed into the Twin Towers. It was a wonderful ceremony. We went to Mitchell High School, where she is a graduate. They had some students attending, a wonderful choir, and we honored her with a 21-gun salute. And then we went to breakfast afterwards. There were about 40 of us, and the most amazing thing I love about September 11th is when someone else in the restaurant realized who we were celebrating. They paid for half of the ticket. And 40 people eating all of that food, to have a complete stranger pay for half of the cost was really overwhelming for a lot of us. So we love the Yancey family, and we know it's been a tough 22, 23 years for them, but we rally around them every year on this day. So I appreciate the opportunity to share that. Then also, just on my calendar this week, I have the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments tomorrow, the Pikes Peak RTA. We have on Thursday a land use meeting in the afternoon. Friday, I'm sorry, I can't remember what I have on Friday. We do have the State of the City on Thursday as well, and that will be wonderful to attend. And then leaving on Sunday, I am attending the Chamber of Commerce Washington, D.C. trip for a week to visit some of our congressional representatives and senators. So that is my schedule for the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll talk a little bit about my agenda of meetings I'm going to coming up, but just want to make a few comments about our remembrance for 9/11. For those of you that may not know, all of us perhaps remember where we were at the time. I was on the maintenance floor at Robins Air Force Base. I was active duty in the Air Force at the time. This was the C-130 maintenance floor when we got the notice. We all went back to our offices and got ready for war. I was running the C-130 E&H program at the time, and the day after 9/11, I was ordered to get the entire fleet of C-130s ready because we were going to need them all. That was really an amazing time, a terrible time. Now, I grew up in a little town in New Jersey called Glen Rock, New Jersey. And there were 10 people from my hometown that were killed in the 9/11 attacks. They were in the World Trade Center towers. They were all from the same church. It was a terrible, terrible time for my hometown. So we have all of these remembrances, and then all of the work that we've done since then to really address that. So it's a special moment, a solemn moment for all of us. I'm sure all of you know where you were at the time. I just thought I'd share a little of that about where I was at. As far as upcoming meetings, I'm looking forward to our consortium executive board meeting this afternoon. That's for the Workforce Center. Some of my commissioner colleagues will be there with me. And then I will also participate in the UCCS celebration this evening. Tomorrow morning, I'll be going to the Honoring the Brave breakfast and then to the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments meeting, the Park Advisory Board in the afternoon, and then a Delta Solutions grand opening. I'm looking forward to all of that. Thursday morning, I'll be meeting with some Fountain Creek Watershed District personnel for breakfast to discuss some business issues regarding Fountain Creek work. And then I believe all of us will be at the State of the City at the Broadmoor Thursday midday for lunch. And then we have our BOCC land use meeting that afternoon. I'm also going to take on Friday morning the Lyman Prison Cemetery Tour. I've been trying to go to that for a long time, and finally now I'm able to go. I really am looking forward to that. I think we'll learn some things about how that particular place is run. And then, as Commissioner Williams mentioned, next week I'll be at the DC fly-in with the Chamber. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Greiner.
Thank you and good morning. It is indeed a very busy week. I will be participating in the Opioid Council this afternoon. We have PPRTA coming up this week as well. I do have just a few comments about September 11th as well. I was able to attend the ceremony that was in front of Fort Carson yesterday. It is always a very somber occasion, but also in many ways, for me, it was uplifting because of the focus on remembering the United States after that event. It was a terrible and tragic day, and yet the way that this country came together after that day is truly inspiring. The way that we were not divided, but very unified in the defense of our nation. That was the uplifting part to me, to remember those times. As a military spouse who moved here for my husband's work at Fort Carson, I don't often get back over to Fort Carson these days now that he is in the reserves, but it was just really wonderful to be there with our military and really sense truly what we are as Americans. And sometimes in this work especially, we see a whole lot of the negative. But there was an honoring of our founding. There was an honoring of the kind of unity that really makes America special. So that was a really fantastic event. I was in college and was sick the day that that first plane hit the tower, and my mom called and woke me up and said, "You have to turn on the news. You have to see what's happening and watch the news as that second plane hit the second tower." Every year I talk to my kids about that, and I find that footage, it's terrible, and yet we have to remember the kind of attacks that happened in this nation and why it is so important for our military to remain as ready as they need to be. To be quite honest, as a military family, I have been very frustrated at the direction that we have taken many things in our military. Recruiting is down. We have shifted away from mission readiness and military readiness to social agendas, to be very honest. That's very disturbing to me when we remember the real reason why we need a strong military. And so, like I said, that event yesterday was a reminder that there are absolutely folks in our military who still understand that and believe that, and a lot of the other stuff is rhetoric coming from politicians, and so that was a really important thing for me, and I hope our community feels and knows that as well. I also just want to mention briefly a couple of big items that are going on around us. One is the free speech ruling that just happened recently with the federal government. The attempt to coerce social media companies into silencing specific citizens or specific pieces of information that were being shared online. The coercion from our federal government, I believe one of the judge's statement was the worst attack on free speech in the history of the United States. I think this is really important that we are finally getting to really talk about this and seeing the courts do something about it. And I hope we never get into a situation again where we have such coercion from the White House to plant and prop up propaganda and silence dissent in our country. I think it's a very important ruling. And then the second one, excuse me, the second one is happening in a neighboring state. Excuse me. But I think it has a lot of importance here to talk about as well, because I know many of us on this board have expressed concerns at similar things happening in Colorado, and that is that the governor of New Mexico declared an emergency over gun violence and is trying to ban folks from carrying and ban them from their Second Amendment rights. I think there's already been a lawsuit filed there. I think we have had bipartisan condemnation of that activity, which I think is very encouraging for all of us. But it is something that is, it is really concerning that we would see an emergency order like that try to be used to take away people's rights at all, but certainly those very key and foundational rights that we all hold dear. Many public health organizations have declared public health emergencies over gun violence. And that has been a concern of mine, is that it would try to be used to create some sort of emergency order and bypass the appropriate processes for lawmaking. And so I think we're seeing it here. So I believe that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, I'm going to double check on this, but actually has declared an emergency or called it a emergency situation with gun violence. So it's exactly why I keep a very close eye on that, and I think we should all be concerned when we start hearing those words, when we start hearing people declare those things, because they may not take it that far in the state of Colorado, and I hope we remain vigilant so that it does not happen here. And that is all I have.
Thank you. And before I finish up, do I understand, is Commissioner Gonzalez on? Does he have any commissioner comments? Okay. So I also have a very busy schedule, Workforce Development Consortium today and a UCCS event. I will start the day, a very full day tomorrow, with the Honoring the Brave breakfast, then Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. I will run over to a public health staff meeting, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our current board chair of that, Mr. Ted Colas. He's doing a great job, and I think it's going a long way for morale and reducing the turnover at public health to have access to the Board of Health members and have us show up and know what's going on a daily basis. So happy to provide that encouragement at their staff meeting tomorrow. And then also tomorrow is Housing Authority. Over the last week, I have and am meeting with 2 different volunteer board members, one from the Parks Board and one from the Planning Commission. On Thursday, we have State of the City and a land use meeting in the afternoon. And then I will be leaving for the DC trip as well. My colleagues have said very well all of the things that should be remembered and never forgotten about September 11th. And I take very seriously my duty of teaching my child what it means to live in a post 9/11 world. And my colleagues have touched on many of the philosophical tenets of that. And, I don't think I think every single person's story of where they were during that day is important. And I was in journalism school, so imagine what happens when a class full of a news reporting class suddenly realizes, as we're researching a paper, what just happened with the first flight, and we're all whisked up and taken down to a broadcast room where on 20 screens we watched the rest of the day play out. And that was a sobering experience to, with my journalistic mind, realizing what was unfolding in our country. And so I too will just ensure that that my son is raised with an appreciation for how our country was founded, what we do fight for, what we fight against, and just has those strong principles of being a young, civically minded American. And hopefully that will spread out to his peers as well and through the education system. With that, any other public or comments from commissioners? I think Commissioner Gonzalez was going to try to join us, but he's not on yet. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your allowing me one follow-on. I'll just express my appreciation to my fellow commissioners for the comments they made about 9/11. I also want to just thank Commissioner Geithner for her comments with regard to the Second Amendment and the ridiculous emergency proclamation that was made by the New Mexico governor. Just absolutely ridiculous. I find it interesting that both the district attorney and the sheriff for Albuquerque I think at least one of them, being a Democrat, have both condemned it as a violation of the Constitution. It just is not appropriate. And with regard to CDPHE, there is an Office of Gun Violence that is one of the administrative offices there. But going on the website, I do not see anything that specifically talks about guns being a national health care crisis. Although if you do find any of that, I certainly am interested in knowing, since I sit on the board for CDPHE. But I don't think they have that kind of a statement. Unfortunately, the National Association of Counties has a proclamation declaring gun violence to be a national health care crisis. Now, we all know that well. Commissioner Williams fought that with an amendment to try to change the wording on the floor of NACO a couple years back, and that amendment lost by something like 50.2% to 49.8%, just a few fractions of a percentage point. As a result of that, even though there is a resolution within NACO making that statement, because it was so divided at the National Association of Counties, the NACO staff has chosen not to use that in their lobbying efforts on the Hill at the federal government level. But nonetheless, it is still there, and it is something to me that is inappropriate to have as a position for an organization like NACO. You know, there may be parts of the country where guns produce an enormous amount of violence. In fact, interestingly, some of the places that have enormous amounts of gun violence are also the places that have the most amounts of gun restrictions. I find that there happens to be a correlation between those two. But the vast majority of us, including rural Colorado, ranchers and farmers, we need that ability to self-protect, to protect our livestock, to protect our families, because law enforcement might be quite some distance away, and there's no national health care crisis in places like that. There just isn't. It's just a tool in those kinds of locations. But anyway, I appreciate Commissioner Geithner bringing it up, and I just felt compelled to make a few more comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7.
Item number 7 is community service organization reports, and there are none.
Item number 8.
Item number 8 is public comment on items not scheduled on the agenda. This is the public's opportunity to comment on an item that is not scheduled on today's agenda, and Madam Chair didn't have anyone sign in ahead of time.
Okay. Are there any members of the public in the audience in person wishing to speak on any item not on the agenda today? Hearing none. Any online? Okay. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is the called up consent calendar, and there are no items called up.
Item number 10.
Item number 10 is the resolution opposing Proposition HH. Ryan Parcell, Executive Director, Government Affairs.
Mr. Parcell.
Thank you, Commissioners, and good morning. Before you today is a resolution to oppose Proposition HH. For the edification of anybody watching online, as a reminder for anybody that may appreciate one, Proposition HH is the result of Senate Bill 23303, which was introduced in the final days of the Colorado legislature. Obviously, we're all too familiar that property taxes have been on the rise in Colorado, and that puts a pinch on everybody, particularly those on fixed income or on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. The legislature's idea to deal with property taxes, as outlined in Senate Bill 23303, is to take people's future Tabor refunds and apply those to property taxes. That was an idea that, as well-intentioned as it may be, had a lot of practical impacts that staff was concerned about, and the board took a stance in the legislative session against the bill. Commissioner Vanderwerf, I know, testified against it in the final days of the legislative session. If you recall, they scheduled testimony in some odd times without very much notice, which meant that Commissioner Vanderwerf had to give his testimony against the proposal in a gas station parking lot because we couldn't make it up to Denver in time. So this is a resolution codifying that opposition, which is within the board's purview to take a position on a ballot initiative.
Do we have any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. This is a really important thing for us to tackle. And of course, we opposed 303. It was poorly done, quickly done, and rushed through the legislature at the very end of session, as was mentioned. So much so that there were even mistakes in it that have continued to need to be untangled. But I think there have been a lot of different organizations who have done analysis on this. I know Common Sense Institute is one of those. Folks like those at Advance Colorado have also taken a look at this to see what truly is the impact, because that can be very difficult as voters to look at something so big and the language on something like this and really figure out what the impact is to us. And so I think those are really good resources. But I think one of the most impactful things that I've heard is when we look at HH and we have seen those who support it talk about it being property tax relief, it's important to realize that they don't have to ask voters for permission to lower their taxes. They only have to ask voters for permission when they're taking more. So you really have to look closely at this ballot initiative and say, if they had wanted to just simply lower taxes, they could have done that in the legislature. They wouldn't have needed to go through the entire process of bringing it to voters. And so there's something more there. So don't let them tell you that it's just a property tax decrease. That would not be necessary. It would not be necessary to do all of this if that was the case. Along those lines, they should have, rather than push through a last minute bill, they should have used the time the legislature has to work on property tax relief for Coloradans. They could still do that. They could still call a special session. I know there are many still calling for that. So for those reasons specifically, the fact that this is truly not going to be a reduction for folks, they are going to see their Tabor refund evaporate, and it will no longer be able to provide relief in the future. And so really this is a bait and switch. And so I'm fully in support of this resolution, which is opposing Proposition HH.
Commissioner Vanderwerk.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I would encourage all voters in the state of Colorado to vote no on Proposition HH. It looks like it will make the ballot. This proposition is wrong for many, many reasons. Just even on the most simplistic things, it is a multiple subject topic proposition that's going to be before the voters. And that, in my humble opinion, is a violation of Colorado statute that requires all of these items that citizens will vote on to be single topic items instead of multiple topic items. But this has several things in it. As Commissioner Geithner mentioned, I do also believe it is a bait and switch. It predominantly talks about reducing property taxes, and it fails to adequately express to citizens that it will actually predominantly de-Tabor the state. So while it looks like it's going to save you a little bit of money up front, in the long term, the state will keep an enormous amount of potential Tabor refunds, and it will not save taxpayers money at all. So I will be voting against it. I support this proclamation to oppose it, and I would encourage Colorado citizens to also vote against it when you see it on the November ballot. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
I think that Commissioner Geithner stated it very well, is that if it were truly a property tax reduction, they wouldn't have to ask us as the voters. So it is a bait and switch, specifically with the language of shall property taxes be reduced. But it states here from the Common Sense Institute, if Proposition HH passes, the state of Colorado will be able to collect and spend an additional $9 billion each year, funded by the significant increase in taxes the Proposition HH allows. Proposition HH authorizes a 25% increase in the annual growth rate in the state spending limit, adding dollars to the state's largest budget on record. Proposition HH is voted through by the state. It's going to extend, if it were extended by the state legislature through 2040, which is allowed without voter approval, it could produce a $21 billion net tax increase as property taxes are reduced by $21 billion while state taxes increased by 42 billion. When I fill out my own personal taxes, that doesn't sound to me like a tax deduction. Strongly encourage the voters to vote no on Proposition HH. We deserve honesty from our government, not a bait and switch, and we deserve for this government to be more transparent in what they're doing with our tax dollars.
Thank you. And I understand that Commissioner Gonzalez did make it online, and I think he has some comments on this item as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, having issues trying to log on today. Apologize for my voice as well. I said this when the legislative bill first came out. I think I too also dialed in and did remote testimony against this one. The bill is a pure bait and switch, a effort by the state to retain residents' taxpayer funds to spend as they please. As was mentioned already, if this was really about reducing taxes, they wouldn't need a vote of the people. The general public should really just look at that. If you're voting on this, that means that they're trying to keep our money, your money. Another important aspect of this is I believe the reduction in the rate for the tax is 0.06. I want to say that again, 0.06. So what the state and Governor Polis are particularly trying to do is give you pennies on the dollar back on your reduction on property tax, pennies on the dollar, to then therefore have you give up Tabor refunds, our money. These are overages that belong to the people in the, as was mentioned, billions of dollars, pennies to then keep our Tabor refunds, taxpayer funds, money that you've earned, hard-earned money that they want to keep. And as was mentioned already as well, this is for 10 years. But guess what? It's not just for 10 years. The mechanism as written allows under a circumstance to keep it forever. So this could be billions per year forever of taxpayer funds being kept by the state to give you back pennies when they could fix this issue in a special session to do actual property tax reform. So I'm asking people to vote no on HH, and I am fully supportive of this opposition to Proposition HH today. Thank you.
Thank you. And some final comments from me. If you haven't had an opportunity to take a look in the backup materials at a very, very well-written resolution that we're voting on today, I would encourage you to do that because as my colleagues have spoken very eloquently about it all, there are several paragraphs here that bring up all the issues, not just the ones discussed today, amongst them being potentially violating the single subject requirement, which the implication of that is that citizens might not know what a yes or no vote's true implications are. And so I would encourage you to look at the full resolution that we're voting on today. And with that, I will accept a motion. Commissioner Guy.
Thank you. I'm going to add just another quick brief comment here. I really appreciate Commissioner Gonzalez bringing up the 0.06 number because that is the tax relief that is being touted here. I made some comments a while back about this being an exploitation of families that are truly concerned about their property taxes. I think that's exactly what this is when you're not offering real relief. I do want to point out that there will be property tax relief in El Paso County because we will be lowering our mills in order to be in compliance with Tabor. And so that is something to know for taxpayers in El Paso County. Not necessarily other counties that I can speak to. Every county will do things a little bit differently, but I wanted to make that clear here as well. And I will just say, Kyle Clark, who is obviously a news reporter, and I do not often agree, but on this one, he simply said, "Governor, do you think we're dumb?" And I'll leave it there and just say I move approval of this resolution to oppose Proposition HH.
And Commissioner Gonzalez, do I hear a second?
Second?
Do I hear a second from here?
Second.
Okay. That has been moved and seconded. I will call the roll. Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf,
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner,
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Item number 11.
Item number 11 is a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for Powers Boulevard Extension reimbursement between the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and Copper Ridge Metropolitan District. Joshua Palmer, County Engineer, Department of Public Works.
Mr. Palmer.
Morning, Josh Palmer, County Engineer. So I'm here to present to you the resolution to approve the IGA between El Paso County, PPRTA, City of Colorado Springs, and Copper Ridge Metro District for the reimbursement for the North Powers Extension project. So this IGA is specifically for the terms and the mechanism by which the district would be reimbursed. As I mentioned, this is a four-way agreement between the county, the city, PPRTA, and the Metro District. And this IGA would approve the mechanism by which the district would be approved for engineering and construction costs only for the project. As you're probably aware, the first part of the project between I-25 and Voyager Parkway was previously constructed by the district a few years ago. So this project would extend that from that intersection south to State Highway 83. This is currently a PPRTA 2B list project, as well as a voter-approved PPRTA 3A list project. The first priority for the phasing for this final part of the project would be the intersection of Voyager Parkway and Powers Boulevard, and then future phases would follow roadway, bridges, and such. So the district would issue bonds to fund the project to start now. And the reimbursement plan, as you can see, the city would contribute $72 million from their PPRTA 3 revenue distribution, and that would be $7.2 million annually over the 10-year RTA 3 span. The county would contribute $31 million for a total of $103 million from RTA 3 revenue. And the city has identified potentially an additional $18.5 million from any money that would be left over from their Mark Shuffle Road project. So their project on Mark Shuffle was an RTA 3 project as well, but they were able to move some money around and start some of those phases now. So any money that would be left over could be, with PPRTA board approval, then allocated to the North Powers Extension project. And then finally, since this is a PPRTA 2B list project, any additional money that is left over after the A-list projects have been fully funded could be then allocated to this project as well. And this is all dependent on PPRTA board approval. So the additional money from the city and the money from RTA 2 from PPRTA would be at the discretion of the board. But they are just monies that could potentially be available. And like I mentioned, reimbursement would only be for construction and engineering costs. So it wouldn't go towards any legal costs, any administrative costs, anything that is not directly associated or related with the construction of this project would not be reimbursable. And like many of our other joint projects, the city would be the lead agency on this project. So they would be the PM, they would be reviewing all requests for reimbursement, and then the county would be involved with that as necessary. Some of the benefits to this is a regional project. It's a PPRTA 3 A-list project that was approved by the voters. But rather than waiting for money to be available via the revenue for both the city and the county, the district will be able to start the project now and then being reimbursed over the next 10 years, starting in 25, the 10-year period for PPRTA 3. There's an obvious advantage in the time value of money. We know that Inflation has not slowed down as much as we had hoped. Construction costs, materials, labor are increasing. We do our best to project out when we're planning for projects, but there is a risk. And the risk at this point is something that the district is willing to take on themselves. So we would get a project now at today's dollar value while reimbursing the district in future dollars. And like I mentioned, only normal project costs, so we wouldn't have to worry about anything additional that the district may be incurring to complete this project. It is a regional project. While it is in the city limits, it will ultimately be a state highway, a CDOT-owned and maintained road. It is a regional project. It would provide much needed relief to north and south traffic, as well as east and west in the northwest part of the region. It is voter approved. Being able to construct the project now, as opposed to maybe piecemealing it out, phasing it over multiple years, decreases the impact to project schedules and budgets, and would ultimately provide a better project. So staff at the county has been well-versed and heavily involved in this process. We've reviewed it. We do recommend approval. The county would be involved with the city as the lead agency. The only committed impact for El Paso County is the $31 million that I mentioned. Any additional money that would be available would be at the discretion of the PPRTA board. PPRTA board, Citizen Advisory Committee, as well as the board approved this, and the city of Colorado Springs approved it as well. So it is now before our Board of County Commissioners to consider as well. That is the end of the presentation. If there's any additional questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Do we have any questions from commissioners?
I just want to reiterate, on the financing of the bonds, will the taxpayers be paying any of this interest?
No.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm always really excited when we find innovative ways to get things done faster for residents, especially when it comes to roads and our infrastructure and just the need to get make it easier for people to get from place to place. I think this is a good example of that without bringing on additional costs or burdens. I'm grateful for the partnerships that PPRTA has and with a metro district that obviously sees a huge value in what this can provide for citizens and businesses, to be honest. And so I'm really, really proud of the partnership. Glad to see us coming up again with those innovative ways to move things forward and get things done faster. We all know that in the world of government, sometimes things move slower than we want. This is a really good example of moving that forward and taking advantage of an opportunity to provide better service for our citizens. So I am in support of this item.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am also in support of this. Our community here, El Paso County, in the city of Colorado Springs, has needed a half-circle loop that travels around the eastern side of El Paso County. We've needed it for a long time. This takes us one giant step closer to that. There is more work to do on the southeast side, but this will be immensely beneficial, I think, for citizens. And the whole point of road infrastructure is to try to be both safe for people to get from one place to another, but also be efficient at getting from one place to another. I think this will go a long way to adding to that efficiency and will do a lot to deal with allowing us to grow in the future, but also to help the citizens we have today that need to take some unusual routes from time to time in order to get from the east side of Colorado Springs onto I-25 going to north to Denver. I also find it interesting that we had to basically deal with some of these issues ourselves here locally in the creation of PPRTA. I noticed that Denver doesn't have a similar type of structure, to my knowledge, and it would be of great benefit to them if they would do something like this as well. I think it would help them a lot. So I think this project, the fact that local governments are helping to deal with this locally, is a prime example of how government can work and can work well. And I would encourage Denver to do more of it also. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
So It's very well known. I like roads, and I know that Copper Ridge first started this project by building the Powers Boulevard exit. Having attended the statewide Transportation Advisory Committee last week, it gets routinely frustrating to wait and wait and wait until a CDOT project comes up to the top of the list. And you wait for quite some time for those projects. So back when I first moved here in 1992, Woodman and Powers was a four-way stop. And then eventually the developer built Powers North all the way up to Briargate Parkway so that they could continue development east of Powers Boulevard. With the Copper Ridge Metro District, they built the exit from Powers and I-25 to go into some sales tax areas where they could generate sales tax there. This is just an extension that will greatly help the residents of Flying Horse and greatly help the residents of Northgate, because once they hit the end of that little Powers extension, they typically go south to get back to Interquest Parkway, which really clogs up Voyager Parkway and is not fair to the residents there. So this is an innovative way to bring a project forward sooner. I am thankful that the Copper Ridge Metro District was willing to do this, and that we've been able to find a way that we feel under our leadership of the Pikes Peak RTA and those expenditures of taxpayer funds that is done in a conservative manner that our taxpayers would approve of. Thank you.
My colleagues have spoken well on this too. My exact notes were almost straight, exactly what Commissioner Geithner ended up saying, that this is a creative and collaborative way to move forward with a project much quicker and have it deliver real results to today's residents. And it's an excellent collaborative effort and way to do that. I am ready for a motion. Unless Commissioner Gonzalez, I'm not sure if he's still online. Did you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think this is a good innovative idea. What we're doing is we're basically just making a commitment to something that voters already approved that we would be providing. And so we'll be providing a commitment that, yes, we will be doing this, so it allows them to get the bonding. And so this makes a lot of sense, allows them to get started on this portion of the road extension faster and at a potentially lower cost, doing the dollars 2 years or a year and a half earlier than projected start time. The 18.5 million, which is already up for other options or potential options, would again be debated separately, and the agreement, the IGA here, leaves that in place as something that could be debated, because as I believe Commissioner Vanderwerf mentioned, there are other areas of importance. Southeast, the south portion of Academy Boulevard in Southeast Colorado Springs is very important. If there are additional funds from Colorado Springs, I might make the argument that South Academy should receive some of those funds, but that'll be a debate during the PPRTA, and this IGA reserves that debate for a future time. And so this is very appropriate. Thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I will move approval of item number 11 for the intergovernmental agreement for the Powers Boulevard extension.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion up here? And any comments from the public on this item? None online? Okay. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. And at this point, before moving on to item number 12, we will take a very brief recess. I will call this Tuesday, September 12th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners back to order. And before we move on to this next item, number 12, Commissioner Geithner had a quick comment.
I do. I appreciate the opportunity to do this quickly, but we had a video, very short video prepared in honor of September 11th that unfortunately we failed to bring forward when we were having our comments this morning. So if we could just take a moment to go back to that item. It's very brief, but I think it is appropriate and one to honor the occasion appropriately, as well as the work that went into providing this for the public.
Thank you very much to our public information team who did that and put that out on social media yesterday. It did remind me as well that Colorado Springs is home to the International Association of Firefighters Memorial. You can find that in Memorial Park, and I understand that our community will be flooded with firefighters and the firefighting community from around the country this weekend as they do their annual memorial at Memorial Park. Thank you for that moment of privilege, and certainly we will remember. Item number 12.
Item number 12 is a Special District Service Plan, Eagleview Metropolitan District, a request by PT Eagleview LLC for approval of a Colorado Revised Statute Title 32 Special District Service Plan for Eagleview Metropolitan District. The 121-acre area included within the request is zoned RR 2.5, residential rural, and is located directly west of the Paintbrush Hills subdivision, north of Stapleton Drive, south of Arroyo Lane, and east of Raguar Road. The proposed service plan includes the following: a maximum debt authorization of $8 million, a debt service mill levy of 50 mils for residential, and an operations and maintenance mill levy of 15 mils for a total maximum combined residential mill levy of 65 mils. The Planning Commission recommended approval 5-1. A request from Ms. Fuller to the BOCC to consider financing options from a public policy standpoint was discussed. Parcel numbers 52260, 00001, and 002. Commissioner District Number 2, file ID 23003. The public hearing on this matter has been closed and no additional public comment or presentation will be allowed. The matter has been continued from August 22nd, 2023 to allow absent commissioners to review the record and vote. Carrie Parsons, Senior Planner, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. As was read into the record, Commissioner Williams and I were unable to attend the August 22nd, 2023 Board of County Commissioners meeting in which this item was initially considered. After the hearing completed, Vice Chair Geithner moved to deny the Special District Service Plan, and Commissioner Gonzalez seconded that motion. So Commissioners Geithner and Gonzalez voted in favor of the motion, and Commissioner Vanderwerf voted against it. And under our procedural rules, that means, as was read into the record, that was automatically continued to today so that Commissioner Williams and I could review the record of August 22nd and vote on the pending motion. And that has been done by both of us to review the record in full. And so at this point, there is a pending motion on the table to deny the service plan. And I will ask for Commissioner Williams for her vote.
Yes, I did review the record in full of the proceedings, and I vote no.
I have also reviewed the record in full and vote no, which means that motion fails on a vote of 2-3. Three in denial.
I would move approval of the Special District Service Plan, Eagleview Metropolitan District, based upon the criteria presented.
I'll second.
That has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the current motion is now to approve the Special District Service Plan?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a question for staff. This was a request, I believe, for 40 years. Is that accurate? How many residential metro districts have we done that with before?
Good morning, Commissioners. Carrie Parsons with Planning and Community Development. In 2023, I prepared a whole list of districts for you going back 3 years. So if I have permission, I'll just read through them, if that's okay. Very quickly, 2003, the board approved the four-way commercial, which also used the combined 10-year and then refinancing of additional 30 for a total of 40-year financing. Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District also approved in 2023, also used that same financing, refinancing at 10 years for an additional 30 for a total of 40 years. In 2022, the Meadow Lake Metropolitan District also used that same financing mechanism. In 2021, the Grandview Reserve Metro District, which was brought back to the board after the initial denial, also proposed that a 10-year refinance for an additional 30 for a total of 40 years. And in 2021, the Waterview 2 Metropolitan District proposed a refinancing method at 6 years for the additional 30 for a total of 36 years. And then going back a little bit further, in 2016, the Lorson Ranch Metropolitan Districts 1 through 7 came before the chair or before the board and actually requested a bond term of 35 years with zero refinancing.
All right, thank you. I've got one other question. I think it was things we hadn't really gone into deep detail before, and I think this one brought up some questions that we had failed to ask and that had not been addressed. So my last question here is, as it relates to specific ownership tax, metro districts will receive parts of that. If they go beyond the normal standard 30-year, which is what we want to have, and that's in our code, I believe, as guidance, does specific ownership tax continue into the 35, 40 years if they're approved for 40 years?
This is not my area of expertise, but I'm going to provide my basis. If Mrs. Smith is watching, Shanna, if you want to come on down, that would be great. But what I understand is because they are refinancing for a 30-year term, they are meeting our our policy guidelines that were adopted by the board last November. And so in terms of how it impacts the SOT, I'm not qualified to answer that, and I apologize.
Okay, that might be more for our attorney, so I kind of would like to know that. And did our changes to the code want us to try to go back to the 30-year, or what was the intent of our code change, our recent ones?
Commissioner, the code did not modify the bond term max. The max term is still 30 years. So it is my understanding, and I'll simplify this to the best that I'm able to, is the applicants will finance it 10 years at a higher interest rate. And then when the revenue is out there because the homes are providing that tax basis, then the bondholders will go back and refinance at a much lower rate for the 30-year term, therefore being compliant with our adopted policies, both the current adopted policies and those previously adopted policies from 2007.
Okay, so I understand that, but what I'm saying is our current adopted policy was the intent to try to keep these Metro District requests to 30 years.
If I may consult with Ms. Sego on that question.
Okay, and while they're doing that, if we can try to get an answer for the specific ownership tax, does it continue through the 40 years or beyond?
Lori Sego, Senior Assistant County Attorney. The policy which was regarding bonds specifically, which has remained unchanged since 2007, predates both myself and Ms. Parsons. So unfortunately, we're not able to adequately address what its purpose was. We can only refer to the actual language of the policy itself.
Okay, could somebody state the policy? And then also, do you have any answers on the specific ownership tax?
I don't have an answer on that, no, sir. I would defer to our finance department.
Ms. Simmons.
Commissioner, I'm sorry. I understand that you have some questions on the specific ownership tax impact of this district. And I apologize, I was not privy to the conversation. So if you could.
Yes, so when we do these Metro Districts, if they're out for 30 years, they receive specific ownership tax because that gets briefed as a portion. And in this, I know it's minor. I understand that. But my question was, if we approve for 40 years, or when that Metro Districts extend beyond 30 to 40 or 50 years, do they continue to retain that specific ownership tax for those additional years through year 40 or 50, if that's how long they go?
Yes, Commissioner, the answer is yes, they would continue to retain that. The specific ownership tax is directly tied to their levying of property taxes. So as long as the district is authorized to levy that property tax, they would receive an allocable share of the county's specific ownership tax. So that as long as, it doesn't matter if there's any debt outstanding or anything like that, as long as the district is in operation and is levying a tax, they receive an appropriate share of their specific ownership tax.
Okay, thank you. So on that aspect, for ourselves, I'd like to mention that if we voluntarily continue to support these beyond 30-year bonds, the board is voluntarily utilizing taxpayer funds to subsidize projects beyond the 30 years. We understand this is a mechanism to support Metro District building infrastructure, getting things started, but the intent has always been 30 years. If we continue to go beyond that, we are voluntarily subsidizing projects that are supposed to stand on their own for 30 years. So I do want to state that. The other aspect was because again, I'd like to see on the record or somebody state what the policy was on the 30-year so we can get a better view of the intent, which apparently, because nobody knows what the intent was. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I believe Ms. Sego is looking up the answer on the policy.
In the meantime, can I, let's see, is Ms. Harrington available to read that applicable section of the service plan agreement that is specifically about the financing capabilities.
Good morning. For the record, Megan Harrington, Planning Director. Yes, so we have this quote here related to the maximum indebtedness for the Metro District, and then the maturity period for any issued debt, not including developer funding agreements, is limited to 30 years without prior approval of the Board of County Commissioners. The initial funding is anticipated to occur in 2024, and any remaining or new debt refinanced or financed in 2034 for a maximum of 30-year time horizon. So that is the language, and it could be up to 30 years, but if they refinance, it would not necessarily need to be up to 30 years. A refinance could be less, but no more than 30 years.
Thank you.
And Lori Seago again. So I'm looking at the your special district policies, which were adopted with amendments in 2022. I'm looking at section 4D6. And it says districts are encouraged to limit the term, districts are encouraged to limit the term of bond issuances to the shortest time period that is reasonable and practical. The term of each individual bond issue should be limited to 30 years or less unless specific justification for a longer duration is provided.
Okay, thank you.
And then what was the justification given for this?
I think since the hearing part is closed and we're directing questions at
That's fine.
staff, I think we'll need somebody on planning to summarize that justification.
I'll defer to Ms. Parsons if I'm speaking incorrectly, but in this instance, it's my understanding that the district is not proposing an individual bond issue with a term of greater than 30 years. Their financing plan, in terms of financing the debt of the district, is based on a plan to issue debt for whatever period up to 30 years and then reissue it, so refinance the existing debt again at the 10-year period for up to 30 years. So each debt issuance would be no greater than 30 years. So they did not provide special justification for that proposal.
And okay, and then thank you. So this is again for ourselves in discussion. I believe that we're going to see more of this as entities are trying to circumvent and avoid providing justification to the public and to ourselves as to why they need 40 years or 45 years or 50 years. As part of the criteria, they must demonstrate that they are able to meet the needs of their district. I'm believing that this is going to now become the norm, that we will be asked for 40 years because these districts require additional funds. If they want to defend that, then they need to state that. And we're not seeing that. I am concerned, as I mentioned last month on a different project, we're starting to see new things that will be used as, what do they call it? The first time use and use it as arguments going forward. Again, this has been done a couple of times in the past, as was demonstrated, but I think we need organizations to justify why they need to make these requests. When I first joined the board, and there's only two of us who, that go that far back, we received requests from metro districts below the maximum mill levy requests because that's all they needed. And then later, everybody was requesting the full mill levy request and saying, we need this as the standard. And now we're being asked to include as a standard 40 years. And that is going to be the new next policy in a slippery slope where, and again, as I mentioned, we are being asked to now voluntarily provide support in terms of specific ownership tax that will go beyond the 30 years, which was always what we thought would be. And now these metro districts are continuing on. And in this issue, I get it. Specific ownership tax is very minimal. but it is something that I believe could potentially hurt us in the future. The second aspect, I think part of the reason this 30-year request were put in there, so if they have to do a reissuing and go beyond the 30 years and go to 40 years, that it comes before the board again. We are preemptively taking away the right of future boards to review a metro district to see if they're doing the roles they're supposed to do and doing it right. We'll be taking away the justification of a future board down the road to make those assessments and reviews. And I think it's a taking away of the check and balance that is included in this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Geithner.
Yeah, could we get the criteria on the screen?
Blake, can we go to OneDrive, please?
I believe it's slide 4 is the mandatory criteria for disapproval. And slide 5 is the discretionary.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
So just a couple of things. I appreciate the conversation that we're having here. I think we've dug in on some things that are really important. I think that it's clear that metro districts are a very important part of financing the infrastructure that is needed for new communities so that development can pay for its own way, and that residents are responsible for paying for those so that it doesn't end up on the, as a burden on other current residents. What I am concerned about is shifting conditions and how that it's affecting the way that we're talking about these things. So I appreciate all of the, I really do appreciate the dialogue. One of the things that I think is very important for our community and our developers and builders who are providing housing for residents in need of housing is that we need to make sure we have very clear and consistent rules and the way that we operate so that it provides predictability. I know that's very important for our business owners. So while I really appreciate a lot of these questions, to be honest with you and Frank, I think there are a lot of internal conversations that we need to have about our own rules and what's out there that maybe need to be applied down the road. But I don't want to start shifting on these business owners who have had a standard and believe that standard would be applied appropriately and fairly unless those rules were changed. So that is one thing that I'm very sensitive to. Where I struggled in our hearing, and the primary reason I believe I gave for a motion for disapproval, is this item number 2 here. The existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. We had an individual who represented, I believe, Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District come and cast doubt on that for me. And that is part of the mandatory criteria. So that is where I am really struggling with this. I'm going to ask staff for some maybe interpretation from your perspective on this. So the existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. Is this particular piece of land, is it already in the service district for that metro district? And does it need to be in that to be considered? Does it need to already be in that district to be considered, or could it be adopted into that district to meet this criteria?
Great question. The adjacent property is within the Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District. The applicant did not provide a letter stating that the Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District could not provide services. It is my understanding that if the applicant were to annex into the Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District, there would have been some terms such as transfer of water rights. If that were to occur, the Paintbrush Hills Metropolitan District would have to do an amendment before this body to annex in this proposed property boundary into their district. So essentially a major modification to the Paintbrush Hills to expand their legal description. Does that answer the question?
I think that it does. So there was not, and again, I'm going back to this evidence. There must be evidence satisfactory to each of these. So what I'm asking for, what is the evidence that has been submitted by the applicant that shows that the existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs? What is that evidence? Since that's what we are supposed to be looking at here today. Was there something submitted by the applicant that would meet that?
In the past, the applicants have provided your staff with a letter from the adjacent district stating they could not serve. That did not occur in this case.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious on that annexing into a special district. Would not the Paintbrush Hills Special District, do not their voters get a chance to also approve that? Or is it just us who would approve that? And that might be a question for Lori. It would seem to me that the homeowners in the Paintbrush Hills District would have the opportunity to have a vote on that.
I'm positive that it comes before the board first,
Okay.
and then I will defer to Lori on the legal process if the board should approve the service plan amendment.
I'm happy to take, Lori Seago, County Attorney's Office. I'm happy to take a moment to check this statute. So right now I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but based on past experience and review of the statute, it's my understanding that the way the process works is that the property owner petitions for inclusion into the special district. The special district board holds a public hearing and then votes to approve or deny that petition for inclusion. It does not go to the voters, and I do not believe it comes back before this body either.
I believe the case in which it comes back to us is if there is a like a refinancing of the legal description of what Paintbrush Hills or an adjacent district would be then providing, correct? Does it come back to us?
There are so material modifications of the service plan come back to you, not inclusions of property. So if they have to change the service plan, and material modification is defined in statute, and it includes things like a significant decrease in service or significant, an increase into debt capacity or something like that. Those items do come back before the board, but not an inclusion of property.
Thank you. Commissioner Geithner, did that answer your questions? Commissioner Williams.
I have a separate question for Ms. Harrington. So I know when I was first commissioner, because I'm Commissioner District 1, I would frequently get the reports from special or metro districts. Are those not filed with Planning Commission every year or with your planning department every year?
They are filed with the clerk.
With the
But
clerk?
yes, absolutely. There's a special district report requirement that is an annual report that they should file with the county. And I believe, and Jackie's nodding her head, that those do go to the clerk, and that is an annual requirement.
And are those recorded? No. Okay. So if someone is interested in seeing those, they have to go into the clerk's office directly to see those. They are not recorded. They can't pull them up on the records public search site.
The clerk retains the copy of all special district filings, and they also have to provide those to the state. But yes, if someone wanted to see those, they can come to our office or we could email them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. I'm just going to state here, and I've made this statement internally as well. This process is incredibly frustrating to me. I really hope we're going to look at our rules moving forward. I find it very frustrating, and certainly believed we were going to have an opportunity to hear more from the applicant in our last meeting. And as it turns out, that's not so much the case here, because I'd certainly love to hear their answer on this. But I continue, unless staff has something, the mandatory criteria for disapproval states the BOC shall disapprove the draft service plan unless evidence satisfactory to it of each of the following is presented. And staff is telling me we don't have that evidence, and we had a individual testify in the last meeting that they have not asked, and then we just further heard that a letter has been provided in other circumstances that is not provided today. I can, as I said about the rules and moving forward on financing and all of those things, I can certainly, again, say we need to keep it consistent. We need to look at those things down the road and not apply those here. But this is the one that I cannot, when it says shall disapprove, I am looking for something. So whether that is if staff has something, if we want to take a recess and someone has something, again, my frustration that I can't hear from the applicant in this situation, but that has to be met by this criteria in order for us, in my opinion, certainly for me, to be able to move forward and vote on this. So that continues to be a huge concern and the main concern. All the other things are a little peripheral and things that we've talked about in terms of general concern about metro districts and how we want to move forward as a board at the county and what that means for our residents. But this is one that I don't see how I can waffle on. So I would certainly love if that is there to have to be presented with that evidence.
And briefly, while staff is coming up, can I get a confirmation or a bit of direction from our county attorney about with the public hearing portion being closed, there is no opportunity to ask the applicant questions at this point with a new motion on the table?
Madam Chair, that is within our rules, there's no mechanism for additional questions for the applicant because the public hearing portion is closed. I know that the board does have access to the materials from the previous hearing. I don't know if it would be worth taking a break to review those for the evidence that was requested.
Thank you. Let's get an answer and then I'll come back to the suggestion.
And Chair, I'm not sure that I have a specific answer for you as to asking staff what the adequacy of the evidence, but when we review and take in the application, the applicant, the property owner submits the service plan as well as a letter of intent where we ask them to justify their reasoning for the need and the adequacy and the reasons why they need the district. And so when you ask about the evidence that we have on file that we would consider the evidence would be their letter of intent, which outlines the reasons why, as well as their service plan. Their service plan really is them telling us why they need the district. And so that's the only evidence we have. Now, if that evidence meets the need or if the board members feel that that is enough evidence, I mean, that I can't answer for you. But when we talk about the evidence, that is the evidence that we've been provided.
Go ahead, Commissioner Geithner.
I was going to ask if we could have that specific letter of intent displayed.
In the meantime, I think I would like to propose a brief recess and for a very specific review issue. And I apologize. I know that my colleagues that were here that day on the 22nd, that was several weeks ago at this point. I have the advantage of having it fresh on my mind, having reviewed it. And I do believe I saw and heard evidence specifically, I think in the rebuttal from the applicant. If you would indulge, I think it might be worth reviewing maybe the testimony given right then and then the applicant rebuttal, both sides back to back to refresh the information that was presented, if that would be amenable to my colleagues. But totally up to you. If you feel like you need to or want to vote without that, that's fine.
No,
too.
I'd be happy to take a short recess and look up that. Again, this process is very frustrating to me in terms of how I wish we could just ask the applicant to move forward. But understanding that that's not how our rules are currently written, we'll look for that in the future. But I think that's the best way to handle it now so that I can go back and review that specifically under that
I believe
process.
it's about probably between the two, the testimony and the rebuttal, it's going to be less than 10 minutes. So are we okay with a 15-minute break? Does that work? I'm trying to keep this efficient here. Okay, we will be in recess until 10:45. For your patience, I will call this meeting of the Board of County Commissioners back to order, and we are on item number 12. Commissioner Geithner.
Yes, during the break, rather than us individually review items and not have everyone see what we are reviewing, I've asked for the portion of our recorded hearing from previously to be queued up, which would include the rebuttal to the comment from the individual from Paintbrush Hills on why they believe that this is basically the rebuttal to that, and I can't remember if it was the second or third criteria there of evidence that must be presented. So if we could go ahead and play that portion of the hearing for transparency purposes, I'd appreciate it.
Mrs. Vice Chair, Commissioners, thank you very much for allowing me an opportunity to speak. My name is Robert Guevara. I am U.S. Navy retired, 22 years. I have a business degree and have extensive financial background exercising that business degree. I am the manager of Paintbrush Hills. I've been a manager of Paintbrush Hills for 3.5 years. I am the president of the board of directors for Meridian Ranch Metro District, not Meridian Service Metro District. There's a distinction there. It's very important. And I'm also obviously a resident of Meridian Ranch. I say these things and introduce myself to let you know that I have a unique perspective on metro districts on both sides of the metro districts. I'm not necessarily saying I'm opposed to Eagle View, but I do want transparency, and there's a lot of things, especially in the last couple of weeks when it comes to metro districts, that concern me and other residents. So some of my concerns are developer control. A lot of these new metro districts, they said what they said, and I agree with a lot of the things they said. Everything on paper looks great. But when it comes to reality, it's not. And you can put things on paper and legally it's okay, but when reality comes in, it's not the same thing. A lot of times, right after these metro districts are formed and they just admitted it, the first people on the board will not be residents. You guys asked that great question, when will residents get on the board? And if you just do the math, 38 divided by 10, average of 4 homes a year, that first election, you'll have 4 homes, 4 residents that would be eligible for the board. Other than that, wives of builders, developers, they have no vested interest in taking care of the residents. They have a vested interest in taking care of the builders and the developer. This is going on in Murray Ranch. It's going on in a lot of other districts. It's in the news everywhere. Developer control, if anything, should have an exit strategy on paper. Right now, there's not. I have not seen that. And that's one of my biggest things that concern me. When we're looking at Eagle View, we're looking at 38 homes. They want $8 million for max debt. They're saying 6.5. But as soon as they vote that board in, that 6.5 goes out the windows and we go to 8. I'll guarantee it. And then if you do 38 homes and each home is $1 million, I saw today they're actually estimating 1.2 million. I'm not on the tax side, so my math could be wrong. But 38 million at 6.75% is what will be assessed at 50 mill levies. Max, that's around 100, 125,000 a year to pay back $8 million. Not going to happen. Okay, I'm out of time already. Oh my gosh, sorry.
If you could just wrap up your comments.
I got 2 other main points. Well, I already kind of talked about Meridian Ranch. I don't like coming up with problems without a solution. Metro districts are important. I do think your concerns of 38 homes, that small of a district, Paintbrush Hills can support them. It's not my decision, it's the board's. The reason Paintbrush Hills initially said they could not, because we don't have the water rights. If water rights come with us, we can support them without a problem. We have the infrastructure already in place. Solutions have them put in writing in their documents that no critical votes to override anything will take place until you have 25% of residents, such as term limits, Tabor waivers, stuff like that. I request the board to pause for 30 days. Think about some of these things, and I have a long list of different things. I would love to have you ask me the same questions you asked them, but pause for 30 days. Really look at it. Commissioner Gonzalez, you had some great concerns. It's very important to look at those. Vice Chair, you also had some great questions. These are important things to think about, and just saying them is one thing. Putting them in writing is something else. Sorry for going over my time.
I've got a question for him, actually. So
Commissioner Gonzalez.
you said you did some math. I don't know how good your math is. So you estimated a payback cost per year. Under your math, and they can correct you, and that's part of what we do here. How many years would it take to repay the debt, bond debt, based on what you said you've calculated?
I didn't have time to send it out that much. I can tell you, Paintbrush Hills has a $9 million bond. With at build out, we'll have 750 homes to pay it back. Based on the estimate of $700,000 per home, right now we're set to pay it back in 20 years. That's with 750 homes. I would hate to be a resident in 38 homes trying to pay back $8 million.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have anyone else to speak in opposition to this item? I don't see anyone in the room. Do we have anyone online? Okay. Okay, so we will close the public hearing portion of this, and I'm just going to ask for questions or comments from the board at this point. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, you have a response. Thank you.
I was going to wave, eventually, let you have your discussion. Just a couple of responses, I guess, starting back with the debt issuance. As I mentioned during the presentation, the $8 million is a cap. The 6.5 is the current projected cost of public improvements. The financial plan is showing a actual, as I said, it's further constrained by the bond market. You can't issue more debt than you can pay back. The financial plan that's attached to the service plan is showing an issuance around $4 million. So it's not $8 million that's being paid back. We don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know what interest rates are going to be. I don't know what the construction costs of the public improvements are going to be. I don't know what the assessed valuation of these homes are going to be. The $8 million is to allow a buffer. That doesn't mean it's going to be reached. In fact, the financial plan is not even showing the $8 million being utilized. So I just wanted to make that point because that plays into the math. I also wanted to circle back on Commissioner Gonzalez's question about the 40 years because I think there's a lot of confusion about that. This is standard. We're looking at a 30-year maturity. This is actually the same maturity. I was just in front of you a few weeks ago. I know it was a commercial district. The financial plan for that district was showing the exact same type of refinancing with a 30-year maturity and the 40-year sort of that delta that you're seeing. It's the same thing that was shown in that financial plan. A different set of underwriters, but I did have Tim take a look at that and just confirm it was showing the same type of payoff structure. So I just wanted to assure you that this is not something that's inconsistent. Last but not least, you're right. He's right that we can't control who's going to be on the board. We can't force individuals to run for the board. We can't force individuals to run for county commission. We can't force people to run for special districts. I think some of those changes might be something that they're taken up on a legislative basis for how turnover and decisions are made. But under current law, this is how special districts are set up, and they are a necessary financing tool so that development can pay its own way. I'll personally give you just a testimonial from this development group in a district that's it's in the county, but it's not unincorporated county, where it's a smaller community to the north. they personally found residents to sit on the board so they could hand over the board to those residents. I can't say that for all developers, but that's the experience I've had with this group of individuals. So while I can't guarantee that's going to be what happens in the future, I can't guarantee they'll find interested individuals, but I know that is the plan. That is how things have proceeded in the past. So just a testimonial.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I have a statement. So I was very, very specific last time. I did not want that last one that was for commercial or industrial to be very specifically not utilized as a comment of what could happen in residential. I made that very statement last month, and you were there. And my concern was, back then, that would be used in future discussions. I thought that would be a year or 2 years from now. It was used 1 month later to justify this. I just want to say that. Did I not say that last month?
Commissioner, you did, and respectfully, that was in relation to the overlapping of districts.
I said I did not want it used for residential discussions. Did I not say that last month? That was my concern that it would be.
Commissioner, my apologies, but my understanding of your comments at the last hearing were your concerns related to the overlapping of the districts. So I was merely pointing it out just to explain to you that the imposition term and the refinancing were standard. It has nothing to do with that development or the commercial nature of it or the overlapping of districts. So just to clarify my statement.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For the citizen that testified in opposition, there was a comment that he made with regard to maybe trying to roll this in. I think it was to Paintbrush Hills. I just wanted to ask: was there an attempt to do that? It just wasn't possible to do. Was there no attempt to do that? What's your perspective about that comment?
Yeah, I did have a discussion, and I think it was the same individual I may have spoken with on the phone. I also had some correspondence with legal counsel for the district. My understanding is it's outside of the service area of Paintbrush Hills, so there would have to be amendments to not only the existing service plan. There'd have to be a lengthy inclusion process. It's a statutory process. There'd have to be an inclusion process. We also have existing homeowners in development that's quite different in that area. So the conversations that we had were that it really wasn't the sort of apples and oranges. And while in theory it might be possible, it really wasn't feasible or practical. Additionally, in order to issue debt on a portion of a district, if you were to expand the Paintbrush Hills district, you'd have to create a sub-district, which is another election process. And so at the end of the day, the costs associated with that were likely to really outweigh the benefit. So I've not heard any further correspondence of it now being practical or feasible. I don't know how, from a legal standpoint, it wouldn't be sort of impractical given all of those constraints and the existing development in that area.
Thank you.
I just want to pull on a little bit of a different thread here. When we are talking about, and I think I said 28 before, but it sounds like it's 38, if I'm getting that right, correct? 38 homes here. We have had other districts where, especially, again, when you're relying on a very small number of homes, we know the market is volatile. We know that there's a lot of things. We've heard a couple of things around the current surrounding homes are in the low 600s to mid 700s. Home values have fallen a bit in this area. This you're projecting at 1.2. Certainly, I do think we still see that there are obviously folks buying homes, but in a situation like this, if we do have the projected time period for getting these built out, and this has happened in other metro districts that were small, where we're just not able to sell the homes in that period of time. What would be the responsibility on those homeowners? What would happen in that situation?
So I'm sorry if I'm understanding your question correctly. The question is, what would happen if build out is not matching the estimated time frame?
Yes.
So I could see two different scenarios. We have a recession, build out's not happening, and the district would go into sort of an inactive status and would wait for development to come back, would come back into active status, and then would sort of reactivate as if we just pushed pause, right? The other scenario might be that we start development, the district has issued some debt, and that debt needs to be serviced. So there's not ability for the district to go on to an inactive status. In that scenario, that's where the mill levy cap that Commissioner Vanderwerf was mentioning, we sort of see the flip side of that cap. The existing homeowners would be protected, and the bondholders would have taken that risk of development slowing. So the mill levy would be maxed out. The district would pay the bondholders what it could based on the few residences that are there. The homeowners are protected by that cap. The bondholders would bear the risk of not receiving the payments that they thought they were going to pay. So those are the two scenarios I can think of.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I
Are
think
there
at this
questions of the
point,
applicant?
commissioners have received the information they wanted, so we will continue. Again, there is a motion on the table and discussion happening for approval of the special district service plan. And at advice of our attorney, rather than referencing a record that we all watched or participated in at a different time, we just reviewed it right there to make it, again, part of the continuance of this hearing. With that, Commissioner Geithner, any further comments? Okay.
So I really appreciate taking the time. I know that you guys have all been here a while, but I really do appreciate taking the time to review that so that we could have those two pieces of information. This is a really tough situation for me, to be honest, because I think the criteria is the most important thing here. All of the other things are concerns that I think we want to look into down the road, and how we do the best job at making sure metro districts are serving our citizens well. But I'm stuck in a situation where I've got two different things that I'm hearing. On one hand, we all just watched in that hearing, we have the Paintbrush Hills manager telling us, yes, they may very well be able to do this, although I did catch that he said at first they said no. And so then I have the representative for the applicant saying, no, we talked to the attorney and it didn't seem like it was going to be feasible or practical or make any kind of financial sense. In the past, we have had applicants submit a letter from the district saying that it wasn't, and that has been very valuable in making it very clear what that situation is. I am very disappointed that we do not have that in this situation to deal with this kind of dispute. So that becomes a subjective concern of mine, and I'm stuck with two different sides of the same story, if you will. What I would like, if I could, at this point, though, is ask one additional question of staff. During the break, I also asked about, because there was the concern about water rights, but I think that there's a piece that we didn't get into too much detail, which is that another piece of the concern of both what the expense is in this particular district, as well as I don't know whether the applicant and the district had a conversation about I think what are extensive drainage requirements. And again, I can't ask that. So I would just like an explanation from our county engineer on how extensive those are so that I can work that into the picture of whether or not it would be feasible under an existing or practical underneath an existing district.
There we go. Josh Palmer, County Engineer. So the drainage basin planning study for this area had identified some pretty significant drainage improvements, some of which were attributed in the study as a county responsibility. Over many discussions with the applicant, it was decided that the burden to install all of those improvements were more than they could be compensated or reimbursed for. So there is a process by which the applicant could submit an MDDP, a master drainage development plan, that would then go towards revising the drainage basin planning study. So it essentially allow for the applicant, the developer, to make the necessary drainage improvements that are only attributed to the impacts from the development themselves. I don't know off the top of my head. It's been a couple weeks. I don't know if the applicant has submitted any additional information, but there is a plan and a process by which they could reduce the financial impacts relative to the drainage improvements that are required directly associated with their development that would work towards achieving the improvements required in the drainage basin planning study, but not go beyond what is caused by the impact of their development directly. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Any other comments? I have a few myself. So we have heard through both hearings the major concerns, and I'll just boil it down to two major issues. One is the financing, and one is whether it meets this criteria that existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. And I wanted to talk about that on one quick point. You know, our process, I've mentioned many times before, our development process, it depends on any member of the public or any property owner to come forth and present an application. And our whole hearing process is designed to have that person in the driver's seat about what is done with their own private property. And so this mandatory criteria for disapproval, and the one in question in particular, the existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. The key piece for me there are two key pieces. One is to be serviced in the area to be served. And the area to be served is one piece of private property and one piece of development. So if the private property owner determines that the need and submits evidence that I believe I've seen that nothing else will suffice, and they want to go through the trouble of creating their own, then I think, to me, that I think the case has been made because they're not saying that they want to provide for anything broader than their piece of property that they're presenting with us right now, or to us right now. The financing piece, I think some good questions have been raised about how we could further define expectations and not potentially bind future commissions at a later point. But I am not interested at all in changing the goalposts midstream, and I think Commissioner Geithner referenced that earlier. I think as a policy-making board, we could certainly look at what the true intent and have these hard discussions about financing tools that are being used now, and that's probably prudent for us to do, but I don't believe that it should change the very clear charge with this item that we have in front of us to evaluate it on its own merits and within our existing rules. And furthermore, we've been given a list of others, some of them residential, that have utilized creative financing. And I, for one, don't really want to. Yes, I need to be able to speak to the financial viability. To the end game is provide services to the residents in that area. And it's up to me to be prudent about that. But I don't want to be in the business of telling a homeowner, a landowner, a developer how to manage their finances on just at the end of the day getting the job done. And so we have allowed that leeway for property owners and districts to determine that for themselves. And I think that is a good way to do it right now. So I am not worried about the financing structure that ultimately I think provides an extra layer of transparency. They're telling us straight up what it's going to take to serve the district for existing and projected needs, which we have asked them to show us. So if that's what it's going to take, and they have the financing mechanism to make that viable, then I'm not concerned about the financing plan. I am on board with taking a look, Commissioner Gonzalez, at being very clear on that in the future. I think that covers my two thoughts on the two major concerns that we've heard over this 2 days of hearings. And I'm not sure I was that eloquent in when I was speaking to Commissioner Geithner's concerned about whether the service could be provided by another district. I just believe strongly in all of these land use items. Again, looking at the criteria, both mandatory and discretionary for disapproval in this case. I still think that the process starts with the property owner and protecting those rights and the proper navigation through this process. And I think in that case, I will be voting to approve this service plan. Any further discussion, Commissioner Williams?
I was just going to say, when I was listening to this tape, this was one of the most fascinating discussions I've heard about special districts in a long time. Some very, very good points by both Commissioner Gonzalez and Commissioner Geithner. I think that the special districts, the Metro District mechanisms are very hard for the taxpayer to work through. I think that there is some very valid points that maybe we want to look to keeping these to 30 years in the future, that we do want to make sure that we get a letter in the file from other providers so that we know whether or not that would be something that would be wanted to be absorbed into another district, just knowing the age of Paintbrush Hills. But of course, the manager from Paintbrush Hills spoke, but just knowing the age of the houses there, that it would take, I think, several legal agreements of sub-agreements. I am in support of this, although I really enjoyed the discussion on this. I think it opens up a lot of questions again about the financing of development and how we go about approving developments. I also reviewed some of the legislation about disclosures to the homeowners when they buy into this development. I know when you go in to close on a house and you have gazillion papers, and it's hard to know 10 years down the road what your mill levy is going to be or what your property taxes might be when you're signing sign here, sign there on any sort of purchase of a house. But I think those are the decisions of the individual homeowner to make. I know that sometimes I wish when I bought my first house, maybe I'd had a little bit more experience in buying that. And so now being on our fourth house, I'm starting to get it. But it's a lot of stuff to understand for someone who's buying a home. So I am in support of this. Thank you.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I also appreciate the comments of all of my colleagues. A very interesting discussion. I will also be supporting this motion. And to Commissioner Bremer, I thought your comments were well stated with regard to the second bullet. So thank you for those. Again, I'm always open to a continued internal dialogue about just making sure that our policies are the best set, for the taxpayers and the community. And, the needs that we have, and sometimes those are conflicting needs, the concerns about growth, but also the concerns about having enough housing for people that want to live here so that we can have employees for our businesses that want to be here as well. So those are my comments. With regard to this, I will be supporting it. And I just wanted to mention I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Bremer, on bullet 2.
Thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez, are you still online?
I'm still on, but I don't have any comments. I've made my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. Appreciate the discussion. I think we all really take this seriously. I do want to address one thing that's a little troubling to me, and certainly this is my opinion, but I'm going to state it here for the record. I doubt that there would be anyone who would accuse me of not being a vehement supporter of private property rights. Those are some of the most sacred rights, I believe, from the founding of our nation. They are constitutionally protected. And I have been the one, even when it is unpopular many times and neighbors are unhappy, to say, I will not take away someone's private property right without a reason for doing so. I think that making those statements in this situation, though, is conflating the issue with private property rights. Because we're not talking about approving a project for someone to do what they want with their property. We're talking about the formation of a government to govern people. That is very serious, and it is not part of a private property right, in my opinion. Nevertheless, I wanted to make that statement because I don't believe the conflation of those issues is at all in the interest of our residents. However, in this particular, my hangup was that number 2 bullet. I believe in making sure that the criteria is followed. There have been 2 different statements here, and it comes down to that for me. In this situation, I think Ms. Ivy made a very good argument that it is not feasible for the district. I would have preferred to see a letter, and I will be looking for that, and I think that perhaps that is something we want to clarify in the future. But because that was not a requirement and other evidence could be submitted in this case, and it is subjective, the district itself and the developer understands the needs of that district, I think, better than the current district at this point. So I have been convinced that evidence is present, and so I will also be in support of this today. But nevertheless, I would ask that this board take very seriously. I don't know, and I'm not asking for your answer today. I think I may be the only person that lives in a metro district and has seen firsthand. Again, I believe they are necessary, they are important, but we need to do a better job on these metro districts because the impact that they have to homeowners, and as Commissioner Williams said, it's up to the homeowner to decide if they want to buy a house, and that is 100% true. At the same point, we all this morning chastised the legislature for passing such bad policy. It does not absolve us to say a voter gets a choice, to say a homeowner gets a choice. It does not absolve us of the responsibility to make sure that things are clear, well understood, and we are leaving our residents with good choices. And so sorry to be a little bit on my soapbox here. This is a subject that I am passionate about, and I will end there and say I will be in support of this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will call the roll. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Nay.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-1. Just some final comments. Thank you for your patience. I think it was important to the thorough process, and also Commissioner Geithner and Commissioner Gonzalez. I never meant to imply that anyone in opposition to this particular deal didn't also protect and value property rights. So I apologize for that, but I do think it was relevant, and for further discussions at a later time in a much more policy-centric way. Okay. That item passed 4-1. Item number 13.
Item number 13 is department and committee reports, non-action items, and there are none.
Item 14.
Item number 14 is the addendum, and there is no addendum today.
Item 15.
Item number 15 is the executive session, 15A, pursuant to CRS 246402 4B and E, executive session request for the purposes of holding a conference with the county attorney's office for receiving legal advice on specific legal questions and determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators related to the extinguishment of a conservation easement on a small portion of property for Beacon Light Road Improvement Project. Lori Seago, Senior Assistant County Attorney.
I move we go into executive session for the information stated on the record.
I'll second.
That has been moved and seconded. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And if Commissioner Gonzalez is still online? And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-0 with Commissioner Gonzalez excused to go into executive session.